Really great to have Colin with us again today. Colin is our brother-in-law, Pete, my brother-in-law. He's married to Jill, who's also here. And Jill and Colin did a great talk for us back in July, when they talked about the Isle of Thanet. They both love London, and they go to loads of exhibitions, museums. And Colin especially loves walking around London. So we're really looking forward to this. And we also, I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining either live now or those of you who will be watching on YouTube. So we will start the first part of our presentation, which will end at 10:50. Okay, and then we have a 20-minute break. So, Colin, over to you. Thanks very much.
Right, good morning, everybody. This is a very self-indulgent walk presentation on my behalf. It includes all my interests, from walking, railways, canals, art, cricket. So I hope you'll bear with me, and I hope you'll find something interesting in what I'm going to talk about as we walk around London. I've had links with London, well, all my life really. I grew up in Sussex, so I was quite close to London. It was always exciting to go there. I went to university there for 3 years and had a great time and met some really great friends who are still my friends now. And I had the privilege of working there as well, latterly. I think you have a love-hate relationship with London, don't you? As Dr. Johnson said, when a man is tired of London, a man is tired of life. I know a lot of people who are perhaps regular commuters to London can't wait for the day when they don't have to travel up to London every day. For me, London is a fascinating place. I have a love-hate relationship, I suppose, with it now. Anyway, let's crack on with the talk. This is the talk of the Capitol Ring. If I can make this video work. There we are. This is the, sorry, it's not a particularly good image of the whole route round. You can see it's in 15 sections. I did it with friends by combining sections together over, is it 7 days, I think. You can see it varies between about 4 miles from Charing Cross, about route around number 12, and further out, number 9 and 10. That's the furthest away it gets from the centre of London. I've long wanted to do this walk before I actually did it, and I finally achieved it in 2015. So we're going to start off with stages 1, 2, and part of 3, and you can see it was 13.9 miles, so quite a long stretch between Woolwich and Beckenham Junction. Woolwich reminds me very much of Chatham, near where I live, which was very much a military and naval town. Woolwich is very famous for having a royal dockyard.
Does anybody else not see it on full screen?
And the Royal Arsenal, which was founded here in 1545, the Royal Military Academy before it moved to Sandhurst. And so it's very much rooted in military history. The dockyard was a very extensive establishment. It was so large it had its own railway, and there was some fascinating photographs you can find of the workers there, predominantly women, of course, particularly in wartime, filling shells and cartridges, and not very nice, but something very topical, of course, in this particular week. Something which picks up my talk around Thanet with Jill was an Anthony Gormley statue. And here they are in Woolwich, a whole series of them, in a circle in the middle of what is now the regenerated dockyard, arsenal, I suppose. Lots of old buildings retained, but lots of new buildings as well. So it's a very fascinating area to visit, and I would recommend that. This is an aerial shot of how large the arsenal used to be. You can see it's on the south bank of the river. And the walk will finish on the north bank of the river in, well, several minutes' time after a few breaks. And on the left there, you can see a power station. But, you know, this really very much dominated this part of Woolwich, and you can imagine how many people it employed. I've got a series of questions for you today as we go through, and I'll give you the answers at the end. The dockyard workers created or formed a football club in 1886, and it was called Dial Square Football Club. That club still exists, but it's been renamed a couple of times at least. What is its current name? Not particularly difficult, that question, I think. But you can see this is some of the workers who ran the railway. You can see got 3 locomotives there. It's a narrow gauge railway, very extensive. It was the only way really that the dockyard could have existed, transporting all the materials and armaments around. The Capital Ring overlaps with lots of other walks around London at various points. And the first section you walk along is the Thames Path, which runs from Cirencester all the way to it finishes at the Thames Barrier, actually. Well, I've not ever done it. I'm sure it's a very fascinating and not too difficult walk that runs alongside the Thames. Thames Barrier, amazing engineering project, the response really to the 1953 floods. But hey, we don't do anything very quickly in this country, do we? So it was completed in 1984, as you can see. And I went there to an open day, I think when it was 21 years old, 21 years anniversary. And as part of that, you could actually walk underneath the river, beneath the barrier, because there are a lot of works underneath as well. But massive structure, and as you can imagine, it has to be, because it has to hold back the North Sea in tidal surges. You leave the river and you head up towards, away from the river, uphill towards a place I'd never been to before. This is called Charlton House. It was built for Sir Adam Newton in 1612, as you can see, and it's regarded as one of the best examples of Jacobean architecture in London. I've certainly never been that way before. Soon after that, you cross over the A2, not the A2, the Shooters Hill. There's a lot of references in the naming of places to guns and armaments and the military around Woolwich. Shooters Hill is one of the highest points in London, and it's the old former Roman Watling Street, which you cross on the north bank of the Thames and as another part of the Capital Ring. This is it's called Sevendrew Castle. It's named after a fortress in India, which was captured by Sir William James. And after he died in 1784, his widow had this rather strange structure built, but it's been kept. And I've asked Jill if she could erect a similar structure for me when I've died. A little after this, you're heading downhill now towards the current A2. This strange structure is actually, as it says, a conduit head for Eltham Palace. There used to be the springs in this locality. Eltham Palace we'll come to in a minute. And that supplied water to the palace. Here's the palace, which you walk past, a very old building in its origins. On the extreme left of the right-hand image, you can see what was the Great Hall, and that dates back to the 16th century. And this was when Eltham Palace was one of the principal residences of the English monarchy. Subsequently, it fell into disrepair, and the more modern building that you're looking at on the right-hand image was a kind of Art Deco building built by the Courtauld textile family when they acquired it in the 1930s. Very interesting place to visit as well. You can see you've got the former moat in the foreground, so there's a lot of combination of the modern and the ancient there. It's owned by English Heritage, so if you're a member of English Heritage, you can visit it for free. So my next question is, which famous comedian was born in Eltham? Right, I said there would be something about all my interests. This place is called Fairmount in Nottingham, and it was a place where W.G. Grace, probably one of the most famous cricketers of all time, lived. It's now a residential care home. It reminds me of the house, or the large house in where I grew up in Sussex, which was occupied by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and that's also now a residential care home. Looking at a picture of WG there, I think St. Peter's got a bit of a way to go with his beard yet before we can emulate that. This is just off the Capitol Ring. Then you walk past through a park, Beckenham Place Park, and you can see there this mansion, which is now in public ownership, which was built for John Cater. The great thing about the Capitol Ring is that it links together lots of London's green spaces, some of the bigger ones and some of the smaller ones like this. And often those links are along attractive parts of the canal bank or riverside, as we've already been doing. So it really, really is a really good walk. And apart from a few hills, which I think everybody watching today could manage, it's an excellent walk. Stage 2, this was from Beckenham Junction to Wimbledon Park, so another fairly long section at 13.7 miles. You can see that there's lots of these way markers along the route. It is probably the best signposted walk I've ever done, which I suppose you'd expect being in London, but it's been very well coordinated in its the use of standard signage and logos. I was joined on this part of the walk by two of my other friends. Here's me on the right, and on the left is another Colin. Colin lives locally to us here in Medway, regular member of the church walking group, and we're at Crystal Palace, and you can see the transmitter in the background, which dominates South London on a particularly high point. And on the right-hand side is the Crystal Palace station, termination of the line to Crystal Palace, now part of the London Overground network. Very attractively restored station, as many of them are in London. This is another of my friends who joined for this part of the walk because he lives near Beckenham, Andrew. Andrew is a university, a friend of mine, a bit like Giles, who's watching with us this morning. Andrew's a Baptist minister, very keen cyclist and walker as well. We're standing on the site of where the great exhibition structure, what's known as the Crystal Palace, was re-erected after the Great Exhibition of 1851. The terrace there is exactly where the structure was, and you can see in this image of what it was at the time how amazing a building it was. One of the questions I was going to ask you, but I'm not, is who designed the Crystal Palace? The link with the Midlands, of course, is it was Joseph Paxton, I think, designed one of the great glass houses at Chatsworth. Similar kind of engineering challenge, I guess. So in 1936, the Crystal Palace burnt down, and the site has been in a park and put to various uses ever since. This is the National Sports Centre, which I remember used to regularly feature in athletics programmes on the BBC, but doesn't appear to ever figure in athletics events these days, unless I'm wrong. So that's the end of that stage. I haven't got very many slides for that. I realised as I was going through preparing this that there's a lot more pictures I should have taken, but didn't as I was walking around. I must have been talking too much to my friends. Next section is Wimbledon Park to Osterley Lock. So you can kind of work out, if you know London at all, where I've got to, about southwest London now. So kind of around the A3 area, or we'll cross the A3 in a minute to get to Richmond Park. This is another friend who joined Colin and I, Dave. He lives locally as well. Dave loves walking. He doesn't enjoy very good eyesight. He's got very limited eyesight now, so it's always a privilege to take him out walking where we can um, help him along and try and warn him about low-hanging boughs and tree roots. Sometimes we forget to do that, and we can both end up in the nettles. But generally speaking, that doesn't happen. So Dave and Colin were probably my most regular companions on this walk. In the background, you can see Wimbledon. Well, it's on Putney Heath actually, not quite Wimbledon Common here. This is a post mill, quite a rare example. So I've made a bit of fun of the ages of Colin and Dave there by saying that they were the winners of the Wimbledon Veteran Gentlemen's Championship in 1954. Soon after Wimbledon Common, Putney Heath, you cross over the A3 and enter Richmond Park. But the other question I had for you was, on the edge of Wimbledon Common, there is an area of water called Queen's Mere. And I'd like to know which fictional characters used to like to go to Queen's Mere. Okay, Richmond Park was a royal hunting park. It was enclosed by a brick wall in 1637 by Charles I, so royalty could have exclusive rights to hunt there. And you can see that the deer are in the foreground. There's a very large herd of deer in the park, 2 types, I believe. You mustn't get near them at certain times of the year. Richmond Park is very, very big, one of the largest areas of open space in London. And a good place to cycle around as well, actually, because they often have the roads are closed and it's good to have a good circuit round. Here's Pen Ponds in the middle of Richmond Park. They were formed by the damming of a stream. Lovely day for walking there. I think, in fact, that I can't remember any days where it rained on the 6-7 days that I was doing the Capital Ring. So we've left the park now and we're approaching the River Thames. I didn't take this picture myself because the route of the Capital Ring is actually down at the bottom there alongside the river in an area called Petersham Meadows. But I'd like you to tell me who painted this view in 1813. Who painted that view in 1813? And again, there is a link to the Thanet talk which Jill and I did back in the summer. Now we've arrived at Richmond. Here's Richmond Bridge, which was built in the 18th century. Well, I said it on there, haven't I? 1777. Richmond, I didn't realise until I was planning this talk, was actually named after Henry VII's estate in Yorkshire. And it was previously known as Sheen, but he built a palace here, of which there are no remains left now. And he renamed the town as Richmond. Nice place to stop and watch the river, and some rather nice places to eat alongside it at this location. Paralleling the Thames here again on the Thames path. This is Richmond Lock, where there's a bridge over the River Thames to get to the other side. So that was. But it's only open in the daytime, so you can't cross the river here at night time. So this is one of the many pleasure trips going up and down the river that you can see at this point. For some reason, I record all the next few slides I've got in black and white. I must have been trying to play around with something with the ones I've taken. I haven't got any colour images left. But anyway, I think it's quite an attractive view of Isleworth. So on the right hand side you can just see the vegetation of that's Isleworth 8, AIT, as it says there, which is an old spelling for island. So the main channel of the Thames is on the other side of the river of the eight here. So this is up the centre of Isleworth, and well, almost kind of Dickensian, isn't it? A lovely image, really. And this is the church, which you can see is in two parts. The old part, All Saints, 14th century, and then to the right is a much newer extension, part of which is incorporated the remains of the old building. The older part was destroyed in the Second World War, not by enemy action, but by an arson attack. And it was rebuilt or extended again in 1970. And the architect who designed it was a chap called Michael Blee. I haven't visited this building, gone inside it, but it looks a very kind of fascinating place to go inside to see how they've incorporated the old and the new. Soon after Isleworth, you go into Zion Park, the seat of the Duke of Northumberland, another area which I wish I'd have taken pictures of, but I didn't. But then soon after that, you come to Brentford, and this is Brentford Lock, and where the River Brent, which runs from North London down to the Thames at this point, joins. And the River Brent, its channel is paralleled and sometimes used by the Grand Union Canal, which runs all the way to Birmingham. So this is the start of the Brent River Park, and the Capital Ring turns off to the north from Brentford for the next stretch of the walk up towards Osterley Lock. So we're now at kind of West London, so we're kind of round, just gone under the M4 here, I guess, so quite a noisy spot. But this image shows that you can see a lot of wildlife when you're out doing this walk. Herons aren't particularly rare along canals. I was hoping in the whole stretch of the Capital Ring that I might see a kingfisher. I've not ever seen a kingfisher yet in my life. I'm sure some of you have, but they're very tricky birds to spot because they move very fast. So this is alongside the canal, the Grand Union Canal. Very pleasant, very easy walking, and you know you're right in the heart of a capital city. But obviously there's noise in the background, but it's very peaceful. Planes from Heathrow, of course, always interrupt. But the next spot we come to is just north of Hanwell, and this is the Warncliffe Viaduct, which was built for the Great Western Railway in 1838. It was called the Warncliffe Viaduct because Lord Warncliffe, I think, was one of the directors of the Great Western Railway, but he was certainly the Lord who piloted the Great Western Railway bill through the House of Lords. So he's honoured by having his coat of arms on the bridge there. Apparently, when Queen Victoria crossed this viaduct on the train, she asked for it to stop so she could admire the view. I mean, rumour has it that Prince Albert was an early train spotter, and I understand he had a very early copy of an Ian Allen ABC of railway locomotives. I don't know if that's true or not. One of the high points on the walk in the northwest of London is Horsenden Hill. You can see 460 feet above sea level. So there's a bit of a stretch to get up to the top here. Very undeveloped area of open space. I'd never been to Horsenden Hill or even heard of it before I did the Capital Ring. But this has a very good view over North London. I can't remember what I'm looking at there, but it looks like kind of warehousing, industry, that kind of thing. Colin, who I think was on this stretch of the walk with me, he grew up in this part of North London, so he was very happy to retrace some of his childhood steps. The next interesting point we come to is Harrow on the Hill. 450 feet up. And this, I think this image shows how much, or to what extent, London really is, apart from the central part, just an amalgamation of villages which have got absorbed within the capital as it's expanded. Harrow on the Hill, I think, started off as a pagan settlement, but you can see that it's now dominated, I think it's by St Mary's Church. And when you get off the train or the Harrow on the Hill station, which is to the east of Harrow on the Hill itself, you look up and you see Harrow on the Hill, the village, and the church dominating the skyline. Of course, Harrow on the Hill is famous for the school, which has rather really taken over the whole of the centre of the village, as you'll see in the slide after this. But there's a little alleyway leads off of the main street in Harrow, and it's called Obadiah Slope. So I'd like you to tell me which novel do you associate that name with? And I'll tell you the connection afterwards. Okay, so here we are into the heart of the school buildings in Harrow. You can see, founded in 1752. I think a local farmer started it and left money for its foundation. It's had many famous pupils attending it in subsequent years, including Byron, Pandit Nehru, and probably most famously, Winston Churchill. Lovely if you can afford the fees. This, I'm not quite sure, but I think it's the speech rooms, and it was designed by, if it is the speech rooms, it was designed by William Burgess, who was the architect of Cardiff Castle. And if you've been there, you might recognise his style of Victorian Gothic architecture. So I mentioned earlier how well signposted the Capital Ring is. There are numerous examples of the signs like this that tell you how far you've been, how far you've got to go. You can see we've come 30 miles from Crystal Palace Park, and we've got another 30 miles to go to the Woolwich Foot Tunnel before we get to the end of the walk. On the left-hand image is the view from Harrow of Wembley Stadium, the new Wembley Stadium. Another question, what nickname was given to the first Wembley Cup final in 1923? Okay. So we drop down after Harrow on the Hill, down towards where the railway lines run. I didn't take a picture of a little stream and a pond called Ducker's Pond, which are right on the edge of Harrow School's playing fields. But apparently they used to be the outdoor swimming pool for the school, and it's where Winston Churchill would have swum. Anyway, after that, we start rising up again, and we come to a hill called Barn Hill, another one of those areas of attractive woodlands that you walk through on the Capital Ring. I particularly like the tree on the right, hollowed out. It looks like it could have come out of Lord of the Rings or something like that, or suddenly leapt into life in a cartoon. So we've finished day 4 at Wembley Park, and we picked it up again in September. So the year's progressing. This is 2015, so 5 years ago. Gosh. Oh, I've got to put the mileage in there. Sorry, I had to split the various stages up, and I didn't put the number of miles I'd done. And on this section of the walk, I was joined by Colin, and Dave and I were joined by Jackie, another one of my university friends, fellow geographer and town planner. Jackie lives in Watford. I think subsequent to this stretch that she accompanied us on, she and a friend completed the whole of the Capital Ring as well. She liked it so much. always have to have lots of fluid with you when you're out walking. And the other thing another thing is take plenty of water. And Colin's other important maxim is never pass a public toilet without using it. This is a suburb of London called Kingsbury. There's a Queensbury as well, but this church is interesting because it was relocated here from Marylebone in 1931. The church was originally built, as I've said there, in 1847. It became redundant, and they thought, well, let's reuse this with recycling policy and actually rebuild it stone for stone to the several miles away in Kingsbury. How are we doing for time?
3 minutes left, Colin.
How long?
3.
3. Okay, we'll carry on then. Here are Colin and Dave and Jackie on the edge at Brent Reservoir, so very close to the M1 and the Midland Main Railway line at this point. Brent Reservoir was constructed to provide water for the Regent's Canal. It's often known as Welsh Harp as well, after a local nearby pub. When I was at university in London, I never went to Welsh Harp or Brent Reservoir, but I knew it was the site of my university's sailing club, and some of our friends used to go there sailing in the week. We crossed the M1 and the Midland Railway line and started rising up again, and we've come into Hampstead Garden Suburb, which was founded in 1906. Hampstead Garden Suburb is well known to all town planners because it's important in the history of town planning. It predates the first garden cities at Letchworth and Welwyn. It was started by, I've forgotten her name now, but it was meant to be a community for every social class, and it had all the facilities there. As you can see, this particular street is made up of very attractive houses. And of course, it's been designated as a conservation area and probably has some of the most expensive houses in London now. So I doubt whether many people at the bottom of the ladder would be living in Hampstead Garden Suburb these days. Perhaps I'll do some levelling down as well as levelling up in the north. I included this picture of East Finchley Station. It was quite an attractive building, very good example of London Underground's architecture of that period. You can see the Archer statue on the top. That was erected, placed there and designed to reflect the previous history of this part of what was Middlesex, because it was a very large hunting forest in the olden days. Okay, yeah. So we left East Finchley Station and we've come to Highgate Wood. It's one of the many areas of open space which were acquired by the Corporation of London to ensure that Londoners always had access to some open space. One of the other famous ones, I suppose, will be Epping Forest, which extends well out to the side of London. But very attractive area to walk through. We're quite high up in this part of London. This is a drinking fountain, which I commemorate somebody, I can't remember now. There's also a very nice cafe in the middle of the wood as well. You come out of it and then you come into this part of London. We're at near Archway at this point, and some nice attractive directional signs in this part. So that was the end of day 5 up to Highgate, and then the penultimate stage was Highgate to Hackney Wick, a manageable 8.9 miles. The first photograph is the former Crouch End station, which is actually near where I used to live in London for a year, in 1973-74 with Giles. Actually, I don't know if he's still watching. I hope he is. And this was on the former railway line from Finsbury Park to Edgware. It opened in 1867, closed to passengers 54, but stayed open for goods for quite a bit longer. And here's a couple of pictures of what it looked like in its heyday. That train probably running on the Isle of Wight now, John will tell us, and the station at street level. So having followed that part of the capital ring that was alongside, used that railway line for a bit, we went up through Finsbury Park, which some of you may know, particularly if you're an Arsenal supporter, you might have been to Finsbury Park to go to Arsenal. And then you join the capital ring, joins the New River, which was, as you can see, it's not new because it was built in 1613. It's actually not a river, it's an artificial channel which runs all the way from Ware in Hertfordshire to supply water, fresh water to London. It was designed by an engineer called Hugh Middleton and it actually runs for 40 miles. And I don't know how you do this, but it's calculated to fall 2 inches in every mile. So the water is flowing naturally, no locks or anything like that. It's all using the natural contours to deliver water to the capital. Soon after that, and alongside the river, actually, there's a very large former council estate, public housing development called Woodbury Down. It used to have 50 tower blocks of flats, but in recent years, it's all been redeveloped to provide a mix of housing. And they've done a really good job in creating this area of open space alongside the New River. The picture on the left shows Mr. Toad and friend. I think it's Mr. Toad by the look of him. Here's an image of some of the art work, public art. It's one of those large balls with water running over it. So it's a picture of us looking at it. The next place you come to is Clissold Park. If you've known London or grown up in London in your lifetime, you probably know some parts very well and other parts not at all. And the parts of London I knew growing up would have been the centre and the southeast, around Chislehurst, Bromley, Nottingham, Woolwich, Greenwich area. Because that was closest to where I lived in Sussex, and I had an uncle and aunt who lived in Chislehurst. And all the rest of my family lived around where I grew up in Sussex, and it was really exciting to have a day trip to go and visit my uncle and aunt in Chislehurst. How exciting was that? So this part of northeast London was very much new to me, and Stoke Newington in particular, the village. But you can see this is Clissold Park, which was named after somebody called Clissold, believe it or not. It was owned, the Reverend Augustus Clissold. There's a rather nice story that he courted a lady by the name of Edna Crawshaw. Edna Crawshaw's husband owned this property when it was known as Paradise House, and her father he didn't like parsons at all, so Augustus had to court Eliza, her name was, sorry I got that wrong, couldn't read my own writing. He had to court Eliza in secret, and they couldn't get married until Eliza's father had died. And as soon as he died, they renamed it the place Clissold Park.
Being able to hear anything.
And there's a nice cafe here, and it's a popular place to meet up with friends. This is because there's a lot of kind of waterworks around London, conveying water a bit like the New River. you'll find quite a lot of structures which are pumping stations which are attractively designed. And this is an example of one of them. It's called the Tower, built in 1855. That's the closest I could get to take a picture of it. But all the machinery and everything inside, it's now redundant, has been taken out, and it's been converted into an indoor climbing centre, which is a very innovative use of an attractive building, I think. Stoke Newington itself, I love that shop front on the left, some ghost signs above it, so you know where to go if you want your fountain pen repaired. And then the pub, named after Daniel Defoe, who was a resident of Stoke Newington. He also has a school and a street named after him. The reason why he lived in Stoke Newington was it was a place where dissenters could live, radical people. I didn't realise that as well as being a novelist, Daniel Defoe was also a secret agent. But he's famous, of course, for writing Robinson Crusoe and Mole Flanders. After the village, you go into Abney Park Cemetery, and it contains a number of graves of famous people, including the founder of the Salvation Army, William Booth, and his wife, Catherine, the image on the left. Also around that area, some other members of their family, which were important Salvationists. And my next question relates to the statue on the right. Do you know who this statue is of? He wrote a famous hymn called When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. We then joined another piece of water. This is the Lee Navigation. If you know this part of London, you might know that places and structures are either called L-E-E Lee or L-E-A, and nobody can seem to make up their mind how it should be spelt. And I understand that it's been commonly agreed, or that the best way of dealing with anything which was an artificial creation like this waterway should be L-E-E, and anything natural like the river and the valley would be L-E-A, Lee and Lee. So you'll see where we're ending up following the Lee River, and that goes on for some length in northeast London. Quite attractive, but it's also a site where there's lots of power lines which have used that kind of corridor, I suppose, because it's undeveloped. So it does rather spoil the scenery in that area. But the lower Lee Valley was an area of various industries, kind of industries that you wouldn't expect to see in West London, but could be shoved out to East London. And when London decided it would bid to be host of the Olympic Games, they saw this as an important opportunity to redevelop this area of London and completely transform it. I remember going around this site when the construction of the Olympic Stadium was in progress, and it was incredible when this was the result. I mean, who can believe that 2012, that's 8 years ago now. But this will be the Olympic Stadium, I think, in its converted form when it was in 2015. So it was being prepared, if not already being used, by West Ham as their stadium, sadly having left the bowling ground at Upton Park. In the background, you can see the ArcelorMittal Orbit, which was designed by Anish Kapoor and another sculptor called Cecil Balmond. It was designed to be a structure which you could walk up, but financially it wasn't a great success. So they installed a slide as part of it. So now you can pay quite a lot of money and have a very, very long slide back down to the ground. But also when you're up there, I'm sure you must get some very, very good views of the east of London, all the way back to Canary Wharf and the city. So we're following the Lee Navigation, and we end this part of the walk at Hackney Wick station. You can see there on the overground with an image of this. You can just about make out the stadium floodlit in the background. Now, I know you had a travel talk a few weeks ago by somebody who was a volunteer at the Olympic Games. I was disappointed not to be able to join in with that because my contribution was to be a travel ambassador at the time. And I did a number of days doing that, one of which was being based at Hackney Wick, directing people to the Olympic Park. I thought I was going to leave Transport for London, who I was working for at the time, the previous year, but I was very pleased to be able to be there when the Olympic Games was on and to contribute in that way, which is a fantastic time for London and the nation. And of course, everybody was holding their breath at Transport for London that all the transport system would be able to cope, and it did. Great days. So that was the end of day 6. So now we're on to our final stage and our second walk in October of 2015, walking to Woolwich. Still following the Lee navigation, and we've joined near the Olympic Park what's known as the Greenway. Now the Greenway is actually built on top of what's known as the Northern Outfall sewage embankment. And this was part of the 19th century sewerage system, which really sorted out London's sewage problem and prevented the River Thames being polluted very badly. So my next question is, who was the designer of London's sewage system? So the sewer and the Greenway runs to Abbey Mills pumping station, another one of those attractively designed structures, buildings. And the sewer, there are 4 9-inch pipes underneath this path. And I hope you're not having your breakfast at the moment because it carries 100 million gallons of sewage every day to the treatment works. We've now arrived in Beckton District Park. Beckton in former years was the site of a very large gasworks. That became redundant as North Sea Gas took over from Town Gas. Another area worth investigating because of course that also had its own railway system, which I need to look into one day. But it's all been redeveloped, and at one time, for a period of time, there was an area of reclaimed soil which was piled up. It was known as the Beckton Alps because it had a dry ski slope on it. But I understand that's now closed. So we're almost at the end of the walk. We've come into Docklands, another interesting area which combines very modern with lots of buildings from the past. And here you see Colin, he's filming on the side of the Royal Albert Dock, which was built in 1880. Behind him is a campus of the University of East London. And very innovative use was made of the former land between the 2 docks to create London City Airport. I've never flown from London City Airport, I'm sure some of you have, but beyond the Albert Dock where Colin's standing, the other side of the airstrip, the runway, is King George V Dock, the later of the 2. And the picture at the top, not my own, shows how I remember that area of the docks, because if you remember, I was talking about my uncle who used to live in Chislehurst, southeast London, and when we used to go and stay with them sometimes, we often had a regular bus trip to Woolwich. John will be able to remember the number of the bus, I'm sure. Anyway, when we got to Woolwich, we walked through the foot tunnel, which I'll be coming to in a minute, and we would walk up to look at the ships in the docks. So that's very much my recollection of that area before the docks closed and moved downriver towards Tilbury, and then to more recent docks built at Thames Port on the Isle of Grain, and the new one opened on the former site of the Shellhaven oil refinery on the Essex bank. So we've arrived at Woolwich, and we started on the opposite side of the river to where I'm taking the photograph from. And here you can see the Woolwich Free Ferry operating, or 3 ferry boats, both built, all 3 built in 1963, I think. I know one's called the Ernest Bevin. The other one's named after somebody who was behind one of the dock strikes. And another one's named after a former mayor of Woolwich. Sorry, I didn't write those down, I meant to. Anyway, it's far more interesting not to catch the ferry or across to the south side, because their facilities aren't particularly good for foot passengers. It's far more interesting to go through the foot tunnel built underneath in 1912. And I'm sure that was to provide an alternative means of workers on the south bank to get to work in the docks on the north. And there you see Dave and Colin walking through the tunnel. There is another foot tunnel very similar to this in London, and I'd like you to tell me where that is, please, if you know where it is. And finally, my final image, the one that Tricia has used in the publicity, is me. I think this picture was taken by Colin. I've completed it. Colin didn't do it all in one go. He did it with a friend of ours locally here who did it with his walking group as well. So he filled in the missing gaps that he wasn't able to do with me. So that was a great sense of achievement. I tried to find a copy of my certificate that I awarded myself that you can download, having done the whole route. So that was fantastic. So folks, that's the end. So thank you to those who accompanied me on my walk. And the best guidebook, the one I used, is the book there, Colin Saunders' The Capital Ring, which, as well as including excellent maps, which are also available on the Transport for London website as well, by the way. I got a lot of my helpful information from that. So the next walk I'd like to do, I wonder if I ever will, is the London Ring, which is a bigger walk around London and further out, but obviously will take longer, so we'll see. So I was going to give you the answers to the quiz. Am I doing all right for time?
Yeah, yeah, we're fine. It's 11:34, so we're okay. We're fine.
Okay. So one of the questions I asked you was who took that who painted that painting of Petersham Meadows? The answer was Turner. This is his painting. And my friend Colin, who was on this part of the walk with me, used to work for the London Borough of Richmond, who covered this area. And the London Borough of Richmond pay a local farmer to keep cattle on the meadows here so that it is maintained exactly as it was in Turner's time, so that that view can be replicated.
Oh.
Anyway, that was about question 4 of my questions. The first one I asked you was about Dial Square Football Club and what they're now known as. And of course, the answer was Arsenal. If you wanted to know why Arsenal has the particular badge and why they're known as the Gunners, you'll know now, because they originated as Dial Square, then they became Woolwich Arsenal, and then relocated to the north of the river. What comedian was born in Eltham? It was Bob Hope. The next question related to Wimbledon Common and who used to like going to the Queensmere, and that's easy, that one, the Wombles. Turner we've just talked about. Obadiah Slope, I'm sure many of you will have remembered that that was the name of I think it was the Bishop's chaplain in the Barchester Towers novel, written by Anthony Trollope, who went to Harrow School. The first cup final in 1923 at Wembley is known as the White Horse Cup Final. The reason being was a white horse, a policeman on a white horse famously cleared the playing pitch of spectators. There were so many there that the horse gradually pushed people back to enable the game to take place. The statue in Abney Park Cemetery was of Isaac Watts, who wrote When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. The engineer who designed London's sewage system was Sir Joseph Bazalgette. And did I have any other? Oh yeah, the other question was, which other foot tunnel is there in London similar to the Woolwich one? Well, there's one just a little bit upstream at Greenwich. The other question I didn't ask you was how many miles was how many miles was the Capitol Ring? You might have remembered it from the first slide, but it was 78 miles. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, everybody. I hope you found it interesting. It was certainly great to retrace my steps as I put all this together and to learn things that I hadn't learned at the time and to make me want to go back and do it again, perhaps the other way around one day. And take Jill as well, because there's many sections of the walk that I can manage with Jill, which is great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Colin. That was really, really great. It's evoked so many memories. And yeah, it's really, really, really special. Thank you.